First of all, it's a war. It's a full-scale war against Ukraine and against everything which is important for Europe. It's not only aggression, it's a genocidal form of brutal war which Russia is waging. And it's very good that Kosovo and everybody is united against this terrible action. If it's failing, I hope so. The first phase of the campaign of Russia has failed. They have not been able to take Kiev, and their forces have been destroyed around Kiev. But now it's the second phase of the war is starting, and they plan a massive attack on the southeast of Ukraine in the Donbas region and in the area of Kherson, Melitopol and Mariupol. That's especially a horrendous war crime which Russia is committing. They have over 5,000 people already confirmed to be killed in Mariupol. The whole city shelled and destroyed. It's an atrocious and terrible form of war crime. And I'm personally confident that Russia will be defeated. But we all in NATO, Europe and everybody who is in the free world has to support Ukraine at this moment. Also that they are able to fend off the counteroffensive and that they win this war now. I think we have to be very strict here. First of all, we need to isolate Russia. Isolate in the United Nations, isolate also from the G20, isolate also from the OSCE. That's very important. But also make sure in WTO, in all international forums, Russia should no longer be invited, no longer any kind of visits of Mr. Putin, and also to be boycotted. It's very important to have a complete energy boycott and a complete trade embargo. The European Union has now decided to ban Russian coal, and that's the first step, but also it needs to be banned gas, oil and uranium, and all other substances and trade aspects with the Russian Federation. We have to cut our ties and make very clear we will not trade with Russia until they have fully withdrawn from the territory of Ukraine. And I call for the complete liberation of Ukraine, including Crimea and Donbas. Yes, it's very similar. I think Putin is the new Milosevic. He is exactly repeating the patterns of Milosevic. You can compare the crimes like Srebrenica, Rajak, and many of the atrocities and genocidal violence which the Serb forces in the 1990s have committed in Bosnia and in Kosovo. It's exactly the same method which Russia is now using in Ukraine. It's a terrible parallel, but it's exactly that way. And I think the civilized world must stand united against such atrocities. They should never been allowed to happen. And similar as now Kosovo and Bosnia is free, I'm confident that also Ukraine will be free and will win this war. The war is terrible, and I think that, and I'm confident, and I hope that Ukraine will win it. But it shows also that we have a lost decade. The last decade, the Europe has not been active enough, and now that we have the consequences. The appeasement policy of Mrs. Merkel towards Putin and Vucic has not worked. It was a terrible mistake. We have to support our friends more. And we have to make sure when somebody is out of the context of the free world, that we must also be very clear confronting them. So coming concretely to the countries, I'm calling for the NATO allies of the Balkans, Albania, Montenegro, North Macedonia, to be in the European Union very fast. Already in 2024, at the next European elections, these three NATO allies, which are complete in harmony with our European policy, they should be fully in the European Union. They are ready for that. And they are also mentally in our free world. And that's important. We have to support them more. Then Bosnia, Kosovo must get, first of all, the NATO invitation to join, to be secure, and also the EU candidate status, because they need to go to the next step. And also we must be clear that Serbia, especially now after the election, is unfortunately not ready for European Union membership. So the EU candidate status of Serbia must be frozen. And this is very clear because they have, unfortunately, in the last years, ever closer moved towards Russia in the field of information. And they allow still a lot of this very, very fake news to be propagated from the Russian side. Yeah? They have not closed the airspace over Serbia for the Russian aviation. They have not joined the EU sanctions. Even Vucic has now called Putin afterwards for cheap energy deals and so on. This is not acceptable. And they have not joined any of our sanctions against Russia. So what I call is a freezing of the sanctions of the status of Serbia towards the EU. And I hope it is the shock which changes also the situation in Serbia, because this pro-Russian pivot is unacceptable. And after the freezing of Serbia, we should be very clear that we also support the potential EU candidate status of Ukraine, Moldova, and of Georgia. These are three pro-Western countries. And you see how pro-Western Ukraine is now. They are really very, very pro-Western and pro-European country. And so we all should then be united in the European Union of the 27 countries now, and the 9 countries of the 6 Western Balkan countries, and also Ukraine, Georgia, and Moldova. And hopefully one day the United Kingdom will come back. And that should be the EU of 37 countries. And that's what I call for. But if Serbia is not ready for the changes towards the West again, then Serbia must be isolated. Absolutely. This should have happened a long time ago. But I was actually now 2 weeks ago at the 24th of March, I was visiting Belgrade, because unfortunately there is a wrong narrative in Belgrade propagated by some nationalist and socialist forces, and they say that it was an attack on Serbia. But on the 24th of March 1999, and the liberation started as well of Serbia, obviously of Kosovo and of Montenegro. But the end of Milosevic was the liberation as well of Serbia, and this is the way I think this has to be seen. I'm very critical for some segments of the Serb society which see themselves as a victim of NATO aggression. This is absolutely wrong. We never wanted to aggress anybody. NATO never wanted to attack. It was the genocidal forces of Milosevic who did all these crimes and who had to be stopped. So they were stopped, and I think we can be all very proud about that one. And we should also be very clear that we continue to support the pro-Serbian, the pro-European elements in Serbia. They are also them, and we should make that very clear. When it comes to the recognition, I think if you see my YouTube channel, you have seen that I was at the Republic Square of Belgrade, and I called for the Republic of Serbia to recognize the Republic of Kosovo. And this must now happen. I'm also happy, and I'm published as well in the Austrian media, the EU should also propose something to Serbia in the case of recognition. I think that the EU should give the euro as a currency to Serbia in the moment of the recognition of Kosovo. And this would be, I think, very feasible. As you see in Montenegro, the euro is there, and in Kosovo, the euro is the currency. And this offer should be, on the one hand, the suspension of the candidate status if they continue to work with Russia. But if Serbia returns to the free world and recognizes Kosovo and also joins the EU sanctions against Russia and is in solidarity with Ukraine, then they also should get the currency, the euro for Serbia, and also the promise that Kosovo, Bosnia and Serbia can join the European Union together in 7 years, in 2029, and then the Serbs and the Kosovo and the Bosnians will be in a way united in the European Union as free independent member states, but they will live freely and fine in the framework of our amazing European Union, the customs union, the currency, and they will all vote for one common European Parliament, and there will be peace in Europe for the long term. And I think that's a powerful vision. We should make Serbia this offer. Either you stay with Putin's Russia in decline, or you come to us and you recognize Kosovo, support Ukraine, and be a full part as a member state in the European Union from 2029. And I think that's the offer Europe should make now. Yes, absolutely. We should basically, because in the last 10 years, the EU was very soft on Serbia. Then the dialogue, this was a dialogue of the mood to death. Serbia didn't negotiate in good faith. It was always about postponing, delaying, and somehow simulation of a dialogue. So we should now ask very clearly the question, Serbia, do you want to be with us, with Europe, or with Russia? If you are with us in Europe, then you need to recognize Kosovo. Yeah, Russia has a very, very strict counter and anti-Balkan strategy, anti-Western Balkan strategy. They have been extremely active in Montenegro. That was a very dangerous situation, in Macedonia as well. But obviously in Serbia, they have dominated the Serbian politics in the last 15 years. Also in Bosnia, Russia has a strong role, unfortunately. And we have in the last 10 years not really been forward-looking, and we have not made major progress. The only big success we had was Montenegro NATO membership and North Macedonia NATO membership, and this was really very important. The logical moment now is that Kosovo and Bosnia, who are secured by NATO via KFOR and IFOR, must also be joining the great alliance, NATO, to be secure from a potential risky confrontation with Serbia. And that's the next step at the moment to counter Russian influence in the Balkans. Look, first of all, to the recognition. I want first to call the countries in NATO and in the EU to recognize the Republic of Kosovo. Because I have no patience anymore with Spain exporting its Catalonia issue, Slovakia, Romania, its internal fragilities to be exported, or Greece and Cyprus. Especially for Greece, I really call for recognition very fast at this moment, because they are supposedly a big ally of America. They always say that and they tweet it every day. And the same also for Cyprus. I think these countries should be recognized. I call also for Bosnia to recognize Kosovo, for Ukraine especially. This is very important now. They see exactly how this terror is now, and they should be very supportive of Kosovo because you are supportive of Ukraine. There's also Moldova and Georgia to come to the point to recognize the Republic of Kosovo. When it comes to UNMIK, look, you know, I think it's possible to give the UN a strong role here in Kosovo. It is also possible to have maybe a center for peacekeeping operations here in Kosovo. Maybe it's better, instead of being anti-UNMIK, to change the mandate and have a new form of a mission. Yeah? In a new kind of agreement with the UN here in Kosovo. But the UNMIK mission as it is from the past, I think is no longer necessary in that form. But obviously, I think because of a lot of people who were served in the UNMIK have also done tremendous good work, and they really with the heart with the Kosovo people, that it should be in a kind of consensus way to smooth or transform this mission in a new Kosovo support mission. That is, I think, useful, but the current mission, I think, has to come to a close because there is no basis for that, because the Kosovo Republic is now independent and it needs, of course, support, assistance, friendship and membership of the United Nations, first of all, but no longer this form of a mission. Look, we will be for the long term in a confrontation with Russia, and that's unavoidable. I hope there will be the fall of Putin. I hope that Russia will return to the democratic and free world. It was in the democratic and free world to some extent in the 90s, until the KGB and Putin as the instrument has made this coup d'etat with the Chechen war, and they have now 20 years dominated Russia. That's very dramatic. I see the result of this terrible war is more unity of EU and NATO, to have a partnership agreement between the EU and the United States of America, and a new trade agreement, a new partnership agreement, also a new, and you see that a lot now, that the EU and NATO, they basically meet together. The Secretary General of NATO is invited to the EU councils and to the ministers. It was the first time that the American president was participating in the EU heads of state meeting now in March. And these are historic signs of unity of the West, and they are also very much needed. So the result of this terrible war is that Ukraine will also join EU and NATO. The Balkans, also the ones who are ready for that, I mean the pro-Western countries, we will see the future of Serbia, they will join EU and NATO, and we will all be much more united in the West, in the free world. And we have to now build a cordon sanitaire, a kind of isolation, a firewall around Russia and its allies like Belarus or Syria or other this kind of rogue states like Eritrea, and isolate them more and more. And I think we will be in a kind of a second Cold War, but same as the first Cold War, we will certainly win, because we are economically, strategically, we are based on the will and the capacity of all our people, and we are very strong as the West if we are united, and that's what we are. And so we will contain Russia, and we will win this second Cold War.